Hey, Dryden. Hope I pronounced your name right. Please correct me if I didn't. Want to make sure I get that right for you. But thanks for using Race 360. Super excited to be working with you, and we got a lot of great stuff to work on. So first off, welcome to the sport. Super happy that you're getting out there, you're having fun, and I think you're driving really well, especially considering how little track time you have. So a lot of this will be a journey, right? Like a lot of our entry speeds and getting comfortable with speed will come with lap time, but it's really going to be two parts to the journey, right? It's understanding what we need to execute on, and then it's reps, and those two work together. So what I'm going to really focus on today are going to be two major themes, is number one is to be our vision. I think our eyes are slightly low, which is totally normal. The second point will be where being more specific with where we apply our initial throttle application, really understanding weight transfer of the race car more. I am not someone that is big on to being super technical and get into the physics, but as a race car driver, we have to understand some of the physics and understand how our manipulations of throttle and brakes affect the grip the car has. So let's go ahead and start breaking into this now, starting here in turn one. So as we break into turn one, the first thing I want to show you here is I believe we are heel towing. This might be something in the data, but what I want you to look at here is our brake application. Watch how it drops to essentially zero as the downshift comes. So we're braking, look at that, down to pretty much zero, and then back up again right at the downshift. So to me, that's showing me we're probably trying to heel toe downshift. And I you can't effectively brake if you're going from peak brake pressure to almost zero back up to peak brake pressure. The weight transfer of the car is all over the place, and you're just spending time doing nothing until the brake zone, which we don't want to do. So if you are heel towing, I want to make sure your foot is attacking the brake pedal like this, and then you use the heel to do the blips. But we really got to focus on keeping consistent brake pressure on the pedal. And I can send you an article through Racers 360. If you just go to our education tab and type in heel toe, you'll also see an in-depth free article that I put out there talking about how to be a little bit more efficient with this, because I consistently saw that in the brake zone. And you can see here right now on the fourth to third, look again, drops down to zero, and then back up to peak brake pressure. Okay, so everything is really solid for the most part right now. But what I want to really, the major theme that I'm really talking about here is when we pick up initial throttle application. So you can start to see our initial throttle starting to feed in here. And what's happening at this moment is you're still asking for the car to really turn. Your body, your hands, you're like, come on, car, turn down to the apex point, which is way over here, right? So you're asking for the car to give you front grip. But at that same moment, your feet are taking away front grip. By picking up the throttle, you're shifting the weight to the back of the car and you're lifting the nose up. And where the weight goes is where the grip goes. So while your hands and your body are asking for front grip, by getting to the throttle, your feet are taking away front grip. So one of the fundamentals to drive in a race car, and you're going to learn, there's always exceptions to the rules, and you're going to think immediately after I say this, well, what about the carousel? But we don't want to apply the throttle until we're at the apex point. Corner like the carousel, obviously you cannot wait to that point, right? Like you're on the throttle throughout the middle of the corner, but in more traditional corners, turn one, turn three, turn five, turn six, turn eight, turn Canada corner, turn 14, right? We want to wait until we're ready to unwind the steering wheel to get to throttle. As you're unwinding, you should be progressively adding throttle. It's almost like there's a string from your feet to your hands that when you're full steering, the string's tight and it's pulled your foot off the throttle or off the brakes. So at full steering, you can't be at throttle and you can't be on the brakes because you're asking for the tires to do too much then. But then as you're starting to unwind the steering wheel, you're applying the throttle. Or as you're applying the throttle, it's like the string's pulling on your hands and pulling them straight. So that's what I want you to visualize here. And what's going to happen is it is going to cause you to be a little bit slower initially because you're picking up the throttle now because your brain's like, oh crap, I've overslowed. Let me get back to throttle. But now we know, hey, that's a bad habit we don't want to get into. And you can see here what ends up happening is your throttle application, it takes you a long time to get back to full throttle because of that understeer corner exit. This could be really evident on the exit of 14 and exit 8 that I'll show you when we get there, right? So now you're applying a lot of throttle with a lot of steering input. That can get you big trouble on corner exit. So you're applying the throttle early because you've overslowed the entry of the corner. And you're saying, oh, crap, let me get back to throttle, fix that. Now we know, hey, we don't want to do that. So what's going to happen is you're going to do this 3-step problem or 3-step solution here. I want you to brake at the same point. I want you to do everything the same in the brake zone. But here, you're going to just come off. And when you want to get the throttle, you're like, nope, not allowed, not allowed. I'm going to wait. I'm going to wait. I'm going to wait. I'm going to wait. And now I'm going to get the throttle. So yeah, you'll be arriving with less apex speed initially, right? Because you won't have that where your minimum speed comes back in here. I eventually want your minimum speed to come all the way over here. This is where our minimum speed should be in the corner, right? And we shouldn't be driving through the corner on throttle. So step one, being very specific with where we pick up the throttle. What's going to happen is you're going to feel really slow in here. It's going to feel excruciating, but I want it to. It's kind of a bit of a masochist feeling, right? But it's forcing you to find a different solution to your problem. Your problem is overslowing. So the solution to that problem is really getting off of our peak brake pressure earlier in the brake zone. So where you're sort of, ramping up to peak brake pressure. Let me use red for this, actually. You're kind of ramping up to peak brake pressure. And let's ignore the off and on through the blips. You're kind of holding, and then you have a pretty fast drop. What I want your brake zone to look like now is brake at the same point, the same amount of initial pressure, but let's work off of that peak brake pressure earlier and actually brake for a longer period of time. But the difference in these slopes of the line is where your entry speed will start to come from, and it's going to start to help you get better exits and more entry speed. Eventually, I think you'll be braking deeper, but I don't want that to happen yet because I know our eyes are already slightly low, and typically when we brake deeper, we get more anxious, and that makes our eyes get even lower. So that's the main theme so far. Into turn 3, rather than holding the outside of the line, outside of the track here, I just kind of drive it more like this so I can be a straighter brake zone here. You don't need to hug this because then you're having to turn and brake at the same time. And I try to avoid that as much as possible. So I'm about a half car with more of the inside here. And then notice here where you're starting to brake, you have a little bit of steering input. And I'm a little bit half car with more of the inside. I'm braking more towards the outside of the track. So the next thing here is talk about our eyes. What I could tell immediately, our eyes are a little low because on corner exit, we're not using all the track on exit, right? Like I want to see you out on the curbing closer to here, but we're not. And let me back this up even. Like I should be unwinding the steering wheel now, and you don't really start to unwind the steering wheel until here, which immediately shows me, hey, our eyes are slightly low. So for a visual, and this is actually probably what's going to help you the most in getting more comfortable on the racetrack and rolling more speed in. When things feel fast, it means your eyes are too low. The further up you look, the more things slow down, right? So visual reference points, there's going to be 5. And the first and most important is actually our exit reference point. And I want you to think about this as an exit apex reference point, because when you think about an apex, right, like you're thinking about a very specific point. You don't think about the apex curb. You think about which part of that curb am I hitting. On the exit, most people are like, oh, it's an exit curb. Let me sit there. But I want you to be just as specific with where on the exit curb I want to get out to. And the exit and where you place the car on corner exit determines everything else in the corner, right? If you're trying to sacrifice the car and hold it to the inside, well, that means you're going to change where you're apexing, and where you apex means where you're to change your turning point. Your turning point changes your brake zone. So everything is predicated on corner exit to start off with. And really what I want you thinking about is, once you get the car pointed to where you want it to go, you're hunting for the next point, right? So here, I've got my car pointed towards the turning point. I'm hunting for the apex point with my eyes. Now I'm starting to turn in. So it'd be too early to now pick up your eyes for corner exit. But right about here, My car trajectory is heading to where I know I want it to go. I'm heading towards the apex. It's pointing towards the apex. So this is the range where I'm now starting to hunt for the exit reference point that I'm looking for. So I'm picking my eyes up for the exit point, and now I'm hunting. I'm asking myself, how early can I start to unwind that steering wheel? And I'm starting to unwind. And I want to be able to get out there. If you're not comfortable using the exit curb here, don't worry about it. But typically, I'd like to be even on the pavement on the outside of that exit curb right about here. Next thing here is let's take a look. Where are we picking up initial throttle application? A little bit better in turn 3, pretty close to where I want it to be. But you can actually see here, as you're applying the throttle, you unwind, but then you can see here, look how much steering you've got there. And you get this lot of understeer on corner exit. That's all caused from that little bit early to throttle it. Better in turn 3 than in turn 1, but let's still work on delaying it until you're ready to unwind the steering wheel. So really quick here, a few times you're too aggressive to get across the road. Be smooth on the straightaways as much as possible. Like this bridge, I'm typically middle of this bridge as I come under it. So just slowly work your way back to the right. Don't hustle it back to the right. The more aggressive you turn on the straightaways, you're scrubbing speed. I'm talking about a few hundredths of a second here. So in reality, it doesn't matter that much, but just be slower with it. Cool. All righty. Coming to turn 5 here. I like your brake application, being able to be straighter hands. Again, I think you're having to brake way early in turn 5 because of this like on and off the brake pedal stuff, right? So you're braking, way back in here. I think eventually, hey, we can conservatively work our way down to that 500 board. Don't go there day one. Slowly work up to it, but first let's get this more consistent brake pedal. And again, I'm not too carried away with how deep you're braking in today's driving. Let's first fix our throttle application, then fix coming off the brakes to roll speed. The last thing we'll work on is braking deeper here. We're turning in a little late and a little aggressive here. I think we could turn in a little earlier and slower in here, but that's kind of a foreshadowing to our next conversation. It will be more working on how we turn in. Pretty decent the throttle here, but again, I've got to be super specific, right? Notice how you're getting the throttle now, and the apex point only comes here. You might be thinking, well, I'm pretty close. But again, I want to be super specific, and a car length early makes a big difference because even this amount of throttle will take weight off the front end. You'll induce that understeer into the car, and then you won't be able to get to full throttle, and it means you're over slowing again. So super specific. Now is where I'm getting the throttle, and then I want to be back to full throttle by now. Now, you can almost get back there at the same moment because we're underdriving the car a little bit here. But as you get closer to the limit, the understeer will get worse and worse, and then you won't be able to do that. Let's take a look here. Into turn 6, I think we're braking actually too deep. So into turn 6, I would like to see that brake application probably come in earlier. The fact is here, you broke a little bit deeper and you couldn't release off that brake pressure enough at turning point. You can see here, as you're turning in, you're almost at your peak brake pressure. And that's why you had a little bit of a moment here. That I'm thinking this moment and that brake pressure is a little bit misaligned. I think the moment's actually coming as you have peak brake pressure. And what happens here is you just have too much weight on the front nose. So too much brake pressure, right? Because when you apply the brakes, the car does this as the car crests. So in this corner, I want to be super light on the brakes as I start to turn in because I know the car's going to crest and the front's going to land and then the rear is going to get light. So I want to be super light on the brake pressure here. So just back up your brakes on a little bit so that you can release off of it earlier, and then it'll allow you to be a little bit smoother into turn 6. And once again, look how we're starting to apply the throttle now. About a car length and a half too early. This is where we should be getting the throttle. Boom. Turn 7 for right now is good. Just keep focused on those eyes. So hunting for the next reference point, right? Like here, my car trajectory is heading towards the turning point. I'm looking for that apex point. Now that I'm turning in, my car trajectory is heading where I want it to go. I'm looking for the exit reference point here. All righty. So turn 8, great indication of our early throttle application, causing us a lot of trouble at corner exit. Coming in, we're braking. Late turning point. Notice here, you're applying the throttle like almost the second you turn in, but watch this, right? You're going to have a ton of understeer, and you can see you're going from 50% throttle at the apex point to 0. So right as you're going down to 0% throttle, all due to that understeer, due to your early throttle, that's right as I'm committing back to full throttle. So here you can really see as you get more comfortable driving closer to the limit, rolling a good entry speed, which you had a better job in turn 8, it's causing that understeer to get worse and worse. So you can see here that early throttle is going to get worse for you as you roll in more entry speed, right? So turn 8, once again, I'm coming in here. I'm coming off the brakes. I'm coasting. I'm coasting. I'm coasting. And now I'm picking up the throttle. And then what will happen is right as you're releasing off of throttle is right as I'm working my way back to full throttle. So then I'd be full, 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 full. The next thing here, just really quick into the carousel. What you're sort of doing is going through the carousel through on maintenance throttle. For right now, don't worry about this too much. But as a high level theme, I try to avoid maintenance throttle as much as possible. So I'd like to see you work on carrying more aggressive throttle in and then slowly releasing off the throttle in the middle of the corner to use weight transfer to help with that understeer. Remember see how often I'm talking about weight transfer, right? So right now, when you're thinking like, man, this car is understeering, I want you to think about what am I doing as a driver that's making it understeer? As the car oversteers, which I'm going to show you now, what am I doing as a driver to make it oversteer? It all comes down to weight transfer. So as we set up for the chicane here, right, we turn super late, super aggressive, and that's what causes it to oversteer, right? You're just asking for the car to do a little bit too much too quickly, which shocks the car, it shocks the tires. So here we have a really aggressive turning point, and then we're immediately off the brakes, on the throttle, and then it, woo, big oversteer moment. We just got to be a little bit smoother with our movements through here. Boom. Again, smoother with our movements through here. And then again, so remember out of turn 3, I said be slower on your way back to the right. Here, let's just be slower on our way back to the left. Like I'm slowly working my way here versus yanking it. Cool. Getting ready for Canada corner. Like your entry. Line's perfect through here. Driving it in. A little bit timid. That's fine. Braking for Canada corner. Let's see. Hey, where am I picking up initial throttle application? Off the brakes, on the throttle. You know where we want to get to it? We want to get to that throttle way out over here. 2-3 car lengths later, right? Be patient to throttle. Let yourself come off the brakes and just wait. No brakes, no throttle. No brakes, no throttle. No brakes, no throttle. Now getting back to throttle. And then boom, back to full throttle in a very similar spot. Here, I want to slowly start to work my way into Billy Mitchell a little bit earlier. I'm just where you're sort of late and aggressive. I'm turning in earlier and slower, right? So I'm starting my turn in point here. Actually, probably more like here and slowly heading. And I'm just holding this little bit of an inside line. Take a look through Billy Mitchell. Right now, Billy Mitchell looks okay to me. Back on throttle, be just nice and smooth. In a turn 14, you know what I'm going to talk about, where we pick up that initial throttle application. Coming in, we're braking. Boom. Look how much throttle you've got right now, right? I am still on the brakes at this point. Sure, we're going to work up to that. But right now, come off the brakes and just wait. Coasting, 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 coasting. Now I'm picking up the throttle. And then I'm slowly adding. And look how much steering input you have right now, right? Like I can barely see this yellow stripe on the screen. You have so much steering input in the car because of how early you got the throttle. So there's so much understeer in the car because of how early you got the throttle. So right now I'm unwinding, and I'm opening up. And I'm using every inch of the road. So I know that you might be a little bit nervous to use exit curbs on your car. If it can't take exit curbs, don't use this. But typically I want to be way out to the grass over here. And you can see here at the exit curb, you have so much steering input. My hands are almost straight by now, simply by being able to be more patient to throttle. And then it feels like I'm less at the limit of the car, right? But you feel like you're so much closer to the limit of the car because of how you're manipulating the throttle. It's like lowering it's creating an artificial ceiling of grip. You're inducing understeer. And sure, the way you're driving at it, you're probably at the limit. By simply changing how we manipulate weight transfer, you're taking away that artificial limit. And let's say it's 100 miles an hour here, and you've waited and been more patient to throttle, everything's going to feel slower. If anything, you'll probably feel like, oh my gosh, I'm crawling. You'll naturally be able to roll in more speed because of that. And that's going to set us up for a better foundation for our driving. So hopefully that makes sense. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to let me know. We appreciate you using Racers 360 and can't wait to continue to see you progress as a driver.